Bhagini Vyomavad Vyapta Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om Tat. So, in the last class, we had discussed this. Brahmani Trivedam Anantyam Vidyate. So, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, we were having a discussion as to how this is the Swarupa Lakshana of the Brahman, and how this sort of explains that the Suddha Brahma, the ultimate reality, is not restricted or limited by any adjectives or any qualities or any upadhis or any descriptions. So, this first thing, that the Brahman is all limited by space. Why? It's vyapitvat. It's is omnipresent. We have already discussed, so I'm not repeating it. I'm just reading the commentary. Sarva desha vyapitvat. There is no place where it isn't there. Why so? Because it will contradict the Upanishadic statements. It will put a direct challenge to the very nature of the Brahman that we know about. There is nowhere he is not there. Kalato antaha na vidyate ataha nityatvat. Similarly, it has no beginning and no end, and therefore it's nitya. It's not anitya. Satyatvena trikala vadhyatvat. Mithya means yad vadhyate tan mithya. Whatever can be denied, refuted, challenged, that is not true. Whatever cannot be challenged, which is eternally there all the time, beyond all refutations, all challenges, that alone is absolutely real. And that is what he's explaining here. Vastuto api anto na. Why? Sarvatmyat. Now, this substantive limitation or restriction, it doesn't suffer any kind of substantive. Why? We have discussed that. That Sajatya, Vijatya, and Shugata Veda, part and whole, Shugata Veda, you know, the difference between different categories, Vijatya Veda, difference between objects of the same category, Sajatya Veda, it doesn't there, because it is the Sarva Adhisthana, and it's Niravayava. Because it's Niravayava, it doesn't have any whole and part relationship. Sarvam Atma Swarupam Jasya Tasya Bhavat. The Sarvam Atma Swarupam Jasya. Here, everything, it is the Swarupa of everything. Now, we might ask this question, which is discussed by many advanced Vedantic texts. What about I see aeroplanes and cars and houses and all that? They will actually argue in a very nice way to say, you will not be able to define the swarupa of an aeroplane. If you will say there are two wings and a body and blah, 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 you're talking about its physical contours. That's not its swarupa. What is the swarupa of an aeroplane? Even the Buddhist refuted. Swarupataha, all these objects we see don't exist. In itself, it doesn't exist. Aeroplane can assemblage of something, but that's not the best way to define it. That doesn't define the swarupa. And if you say, well, I know I cannot define it, that is discussed in advanced Vedantic texts. If you say, I cannot define it, they say, okay, not a problem. But if you cannot define it, tell me what is it. So finally, they will say that so prakashvatva and that swarupatah nirvishesha. Everything is swarupatah nirvishesha brahma eva. That is the foundation on which this whole sansara is appearing. Idam sarvam pura srishte ekam eva advitya. Because that is, it's already mentioned in the second chapter. In the 19th verse, he has already mentioned it. Sadeva Somya idamagra asit ekam eva advitya. Before creation, before all these things expanded, manifested, what was there? The foundation was there, the cause was there, the eternal cause was there. And there is no real cause and effect relationship between Brahman and the samsara, the foundation. That's why we conclude our sessions with, Purnamadaha Purnamidam. The absolute remains full and final and infinite. Nothing actually reduces its size or its swarupa. There is no change whatsoever. Bruhi Dhatur Desha Kala Vastu Aparichinnataya Sarvabhapitva Arthatvad Anantyam Avashyam Siddhyati. And therefore he's saying, Brahma, that is made out of the Brihi Dhatu, because it's large. And in what sense is desa kala vastu paricheda sunya, free from the limitation or constriction or restriction on account of its locality or its substantial existence or its, timeliness, whatever. It's beyond time, space, and physical limitations. Brahmaeva idam vishwam, Mundaka Upanishads. Brahma idam sarvam. It says everything in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Brahma eva idam vishwam. Now this whole sansara is multiple, multiple, diverse, colorful. There are so many words. All these are happening. How can you say there are no conflicts? Brahman is one and unified whole. That is what we need to understand. What was, I mean, it's not even one solar system we're talking about. We have multiple solar systems and we have multiple galaxies. We are talking about that foundational consciousness out of which all these have appeared. If we have that grand vision, very difficult to imagine, but if you can, then you will know that all these things. I mean, you remember once somebody went to Ramana Maharshi and he says, the world war is going on. How are you able to meditate? He didn't say anything. He just smiled and said, for a Vijnani, what is war? I mean, you heard many wars, right? And countries get rebuilt. And after 50 years, you go to Iran, you would not even know there was any war. You go to Europe, you'll never know that Paris was ever bombed. They didn't have food to eat. You not know. Paris is the most beautiful, most visited city in the world. So these kinds of creations and destructions and wars and conflicts and so-called friendships and enmities, these are at a very superficial, you know, surface level. These are real, but these are vyavaharika real, phenomenally real. Ultimately, Brahman alone is real. That is what he's saying. Susamparnam iti bhavaha ityadi shrutivir brahmanaha trivida anantyam desatah kalatah vastutah ananta eva iti susamparnam. Verily concluded. Asmin sloke paramatam anushritya. That is what we are discussing at the end of the last satsang. Following the Nyayikas, because they are dualists and they are realists. For them, sansara is real. They are like science people. They are all accepting this is real. The phenomenal reality is real for them. Therefore, in order to speak in their language, they are using desakaladinam vastutvam abhivagamya, as if vastutvam means satyata, as if they are real. Paramarthikatvena, they are not real, neither time nor space. Not these physical entities are real, because already physics has told you so. A lot of interesting people are talking about it. So, abhyupagamya, presuming as a hypothesis, tat krita paricheda bhavo atra nirasyate. Therefore, first we accept their definitions of what is limitation of space, what is limitation of time, and what is limitation of the substantive existence, and then we refute them one by one. Why? Not because we want to understand, not because we want to defend the truth. We know the truth. It is there in the Upanishads. And we are using logic, in fact, to further ascertain, further validate, further substantiate, which is already a truth. But that truth cannot be ascertained logically. The absolute truth is not, sort of vulnerable to any logical analysis. This is a transcendental truth about a reality which is not transcendent. That reality is everywhere. Brahman is everywhere. It's not a transcendental God we are talking about, who is sitting above and looking at us. No. The God or the Brahman, which is Ishvara, is intimately related to us, present in all of us. Is intimate to all of us. Is not beyond us. And the absolute reality, yeah, its reality is all encompassing. So we cannot say that you and me are talking about reality which is outside of our discussion. No, even this discussion, everything is kind of subsumed, covered. It's like pervaded by that supreme consciousness. Then we'll go to the next verse in which Vastutah Desa Kaladinam Avastutvat Vastutah. In truth, actually, all these Desa Kala Vastu words we're using, material objects, substantive existence, we are using these words as a substance, as an object. No, these words per se don't mean anything because they will not exist in Brahman. Sadeva Brahma Eka Eva Advitiyam. It's only one. Sadeva Brahma, Sadeva Sumya, Sadeva Sumya Idam Agra Asit. It was there as Ekam Eva Advitiyam. It was one without a second. That is what is Brahman. What about you, me, the computer we are dealing with? We are using postage system to communicate earlier. Now we are doing emails and WhatsApp, and all these are evanescent, apparent realities which are phenomenal in nature and disappear. What never appears and disappears, which is eternally there, that is the Brahma Satta, and we are discussing about it. So he's saying, avidyamana eva ityaya desha iti. So he's further refuting, my dear friend, don't ever confuse that I actually accept these terms or concepts like time and space and materiality as absolute truths or fundamental categories. These are categories which are being used to explain the absolute, to help us understand the absolute as beyond all this and in all this. Therefore, he's saying, the verse number 36, Desakalanyavastunam kalpitatvacha mayaya na desadi krutuntosti brahmanyantam sputam tataha. You think, do you know one thing? Desha Kala Anya Vastunam. Whatever categories you have in philosophy, in science, in physics, in chemistry, so many words you have. He's saying these Desha Kala, these are categories to make sense of reality, to describe reality. And he's nicely saying Kalpitatvat, these are imaginary, so delusional. Are we all jokers? We don't know how to talk about truth. What about our science? No, he's saying Kalpita in what sense? These are phenomenal relationships we are studying. But from the ultimate standpoint of that absolute supreme reality, these things are like dreams, like imaginations. How, say, for example, there's a cricket match you're watching in your dream. There are rules. The umpire stands a particular place, the bowler comes from one side, the batsman standing in another side, there are fielders all around. Or you can take the example of anything more familiar to you, like football or baseball or basketball, whatever is easy to understand. In the dream, the rules are not being violated. The game appears as it is. But there are new things you are doing in that. It's quite possible that elephants are playing hockey. You can dream like that. You can dream anything. But all the things you see in the dream, which appear as real during the dream, they get negated as we wake up from dream. Similarly, this phenomenal reality, which appears as if it's real, they say that once we realize the inner self, the inner truth, this whole thing will appear as vacuous. What's a good example to give? So imagine when you are a young man and you're going to your college the first day, the first week in the college, you had an argument with one of your friends who thought he was smarter than you. Or somebody said something to you in the cafeteria, or you played a certain game where you lost or something, and there was a kind of a exchange of heated exchange of words. And that was an important event then. And it stretched for a couple of days. You had to negotiate, and there were mediators, and they settled the matter. Just presume it happened. And now you meet him. He's sitting next to you in a train or in a flight, and then you wish you talk. Oh, really? Yeah, yeah, we were in the same school. The past thing which happened is now suddenly becoming unreal for you. Maybe you don't even remember him. Maybe you may not recognize. Many of the things that we consider real today, we may consider unreal tomorrow, in the sense this will become irrelevant. Similarly, when our consciousness becomes purer and we discard our attachment and obsession and entrapment with this material envelope in which we see our existence, there is a material envelope, the physical body, the material world, so many things happening. We are trapped in this and we are trying to come out of it. But once we come out of it, this whole, this mumbo jumbo we call samsara will not appeal to us, will go to a higher. Therefore, he's saying, Disa kalpitatvacha mayaya. Na desati kruto anto asti. Therefore, he's saying, using desha, kala, and vastu, the paricheda, the limitation that you are arguing whether it will apply to Brahman, can Brahman be Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam Brahma? These are the doubts one has. That will become fruitless. Mayaya satatvamasrita saktihi kalpe sati vikriya. That is what he's saying. This was discussed in the verse number 59 in the second chapter. Sasatvam asrita saktihi. Satattva. What is that Sat-tattva? Sat-tattva is Brahman. This Maya is an upadhi. When this upadhi is laid on the pure Brahman, Suddha Brahman, he becomes Ishvara, he becomes Sarvagya, Sarva Saktiman, you know, Sarva Vidyaman. Then he starts controlling this whole universe. But remember, this is a conceptual thing to make sense of this world, to make sense of order in this world. This Ishvara is with Maya Sakti. And who is Ishvara? Brahman is Brahman, verily. Similarly, Jiva, Brahmaneva, with Avidya Sakti, the power of ignorance, which veils the real nature of who we are. And then we have this assumption that we're limited, very vulnerable, very helpless human beings, and we are complete state of anxiety because of the shooting prices of the liquefied natural gas or petroleum and stuff like that. Why? Because of the war in the Middle East. We have a lot of anxiety. A lot of people are losing a lot of money they have put in the stocks. No? Is it real or is it unreal? He's saying no. Desadi kruto anto asti na. These limitations are not fundamentally real. Then what is real? Brahmanantyam sputam tataha. That Brahman is ananta, free from any kind of limitations, and therefore is verily proved. Iktaritva spashtamanyat. So, before we jump to the next verse, I would dwell upon a little on this very this sloka to further deeply reflect on what he's trying to say. We have already discussed in the last class what is Deshakala Vastu Paricheda. Deshatah Kalata Vastutah Paricheda. Tasya Bhava Deshakala Vastu Paricheda Bhava. So, with a lot of logic, we have already proved it. Here, he's trying to say two interesting things, saying that there is no other truth other than the Brahman. Where did you get Maya? What does it mean? It will be explained later on. Maya means ya ma. Ma means not there. Ya means that in Sri Lanka, like satote, satote is in sateta. So this Maya, ya, that in Sri Lanka, in feminine gender, that which doesn't exist. So Maya means what? It's a delusional power which is not real. So it's anirvachaniya sakti, difficult to define in words. Neither sat nor asat. Neither sat, it's not real. It's not unreal also. And then this whole game unfolds. And Thakur Ramakrishna, I'm reminded, used to all the time push this point again and again into the brains of his students that the magician is real, the magic is unreal. When we are watching a magic show, the person who is showing us the magic, he's doing a few hand tricks, and you may be watching them on the American Idol or, what is this? I mean, you have such programs, American Idol. I think also you have in England such programs, and you had a few programs in other European, even in India. They bring in a lot of tricks. These guys who want to be the showman, they can sing, they can show magic, and when they show magic, is there anything really which is violating laws of physics? They're doing no. These are hand tricks. They know how they're happening. We see something. What we see is not real. That guy is real. His laws are real. His understanding of physics is good. Then he's applying his physics to create an appearance. And this appearance seems to violate laws of physics. Like, for example, he may materialize playing cards out of his fingers. He does that. We see that. To our eyes, that's real. But that's actually false. He knows it. We don't know it. Similarly, this whole sansara, the jagat that we see, is real for us. For God, no, He knows. He sees through this game because it's His game. So there is not swatantriyana, there is no other satya which is independent of the Brahman. They are all mayaya kalpita, means these are playing out like a magician is showing his magic. Mayaya kalpita means these are as if they are imagined, as if they are created, as if they are manifested out of nothing, like a magician is pulling out a cat out of his hat. So swasatvam ashrita sakti kalpayat sati vikriya. So this is in Panchadashi. Already we have looked at it in the verse number 59. Okay. Now this prapancha, which is nama rupatmaka, names and forms, everything that we look at it, this is emerging. What is the trick here? The trick here is to understand that there is no real causal relationship between Brahman and Jagat. So, if you look at the Nyayikas or the Christian theology or the Islamic theology, where there is a superior God, transcendental God, he actually creates the world. Even in India, you have the Vaishnava theory, or you have anyone who believes in this creationism. It's called it's called the intelligent design theory of creation. They believe in creationism. There is this called the cosmological argument. This whole cosmos is there. There must be somebody who created it, where from it came. Yeah. So this about the evidence as to why there has to be a God and we have to imagine one. However, in Vedanta, the creation itself kind of appearance. The creation is not a material reality. It appears as if it's all real at the level of the phenomena, at the level of eyes and ears and sense organs and mind that through which we are trying to study is all real. Ultimately not real. So they call it Vivarta Parinamavada. It's not a real evolution. There is no real evolution from the Brahman to this Jagat. It's just a kind of it's a metamorphic projection. And the example often people drop in their conversation while trying to explain is a hologram. Your hologram, it's like a made of glass or anything, and it's cylindrical. The inside is empty. They show you like this, yeah, and then there is nothing. And they show it like this, then you'll see a girl is standing there because these are these waves being projected. They're absolutely nothing in the hologram, but there is a 3D figure inside. It appears, and that appears according to laws of physics. Nobody is violating laws of physics. So all these ledger shows and all kinds of things, realities now these days can be constructed which may not physically be there. So therefore, he's saying, how do we then make sense of it? He's saying actually fundamentally they are not real, these categories, and therefore using the category, the limitations we may like to attribute to God or to Brahman is not there. Yeah. So then here, if you ask somebody, Maya, so this would be some temptation in us. How do you understand? I said, Ya, Ma, Maya. There are so many definitions of it. You know, Mayam to Prakriti Vidyad, Mayinam to Maheshwara. There are so many these statements in the Upanishads and several of the texts. So Sat Tattva Mashita Sakti Yasti Brahmani Vikriyam Kalpayati. All the vikaras, modifications, out of the Suddha Brahma, which is Nishkriya, Nirvikara, Nishala, Nirguna, these Gunatmaka, Nama Rupatmaka, names and forms and qualities, which seem to emanate out of this Brahman, are not a real material emanation. They are a projection. And this projection is possible because of the Maya. Yeah? Now, this is a very interesting thing. And now we'll go to the next verse. He's saying Brahmano Jiveshwaratvam Upadhi Kalpitam. You see how the author is driving us towards an understanding where we are no more obsessed with a transcendental God who is all powerful. If you don't do it, God is going to punish you. I mean, this is not to speak against anyone or anything, but if you look at different, different, what do you call, different schools of thought, Let's imagine somebody very firmly believes that Allah created this world. Today is Eid, very famous auspicious day. So if you don't follow his advice, is he going to? He'll always forgive you, provided you listen to him. Similarly, in the Bible, if you read, he's a very jealous God. So if you follow him, he protects you. And similarly, if you read the Bhagavatam, you talk to Vaishnavas, they say, yeah, the Lord will run to save you, provided you stand committed to him. Yeah. What Vedanta does is, Vedanta has no enmity with this formulation about what God is like. Vedanta says, it goes one step further. What it says is, even these gods, that these are all concepts of God, and Vedanta has no problem with it. Advaita Vedanta of Shankaracharya. The Upanishadic imagination of what is the absolute reality. The absolute reality is pure luminousness. It's pure consciousness. That pure consciousness, when it is given a label, I keep giving this because you may be there in your institutions, you may be knowing you are a professor, and when the vice chancellor is on leave one fine morning, somebody might call you up or he might call you up. He said, I'm going on leave for 10 days or 1 month, and you are going to take charge as vice chancellor or the head of the department or a chief secretary if you are a bureaucrat. You suddenly made the head of all the departments. And then what happens? You are holding a meeting. You are a chief secretary in charge. Are you also heading a certain department? You are a secretary and a commissioner of a certain department. And then there is a discussion about a subject matter which concerns your original mother department. But right now you are chairing a session as the chief secretary. So who is going to speak from that department? You cannot speak. So what do? You put one of your additional secretaries or special secretaries. Additional secretary is superior to the special secretary. He now presents what are the demands of the department and all. He says, okay, why don't you write to the government of this particular state? Write to the chief secretary. He doesn't say write to me because tomorrow he'll go back to that same chair. And then that guy, he comes and guides him how to write it because he continues to be the head of that department. And then it goes to the table of the chief secretary. Who is sitting there? He is sitting there. He finally signed the file which with a set of proposals for certain expenditures and certain projects, and the file moves to the table of the chief secretary, and he's sitting there that day. He's clearing files of different departments. He has a small committee, additional chief secretaries. They're sitting 2 3 of them, and they approve in that final expenditure approval committee, the budget approval committee, and everything. It'll go to the house for approval, to the legislative assembly. So he signs that, and then the minister will carry it. So he's there, he's here, and then he also pays taxes. No, he does, and he has to file income tax, and there is an assessment. So he's also subject to the laws of that particular province or state. I'm talking about an Indian condition. And then he's also the boss. This is an example I'm giving for us to make sense of how the Param Brahman becomes God or different gods. This Param Brahman, with certain names and forms, names without form, but with certain qualities, becomes Allah, becomes Jesus. He becomes the Buddha nature, and he becomes Brahma and Vishnu and Shiva. These are names for the Advaita Vedanti. We have absolutely no problem. There's absolutely no difficulty in embracing all these religions. That is what Vivekananda said. We not only tolerate what you say, we believe in what you say. Why? Nobody understood. People thought that if you believe in what he says, how will you believe in what you say? Nobody understood he was a Vedantist. He's talking about the supreme reality, and I believe in the supreme reality where there are layers of truths and layers of realities, layers of authority. So why should I have any problem? When I know what the ultimate is, rest of it is our stories. And there is one story by one community, there is another story by another community, there is another story by another community when it comes to their respective faiths. And they may fight. The Advaita Vedantin doesn't fight. Unless he sort of comes down to the level of a certain faith-based identity. At his level, he got no problems. And therefore, he's saying Brahmana. Now, what about the Jiva? Because everything is Brahman, is the Jiva Brahman? Brahman or not? The cat is Brahman or not? You know, a Dalit, you can, Sudras and women cannot read text somebody wrote, and then other people followed. And they stuck to that strategy. Now tell me, a Dalit is not Brahman. He's not Param Brahma. A girl is not Param Brahma. A little baby anything about Brahman or God or Allah or Jesus, he's not Brahman. Everybody is embodying the same light, the same luminosity, the same blissful nature, which is the swarup of all of us. Somebody appears, it's like out of gold we make so many ornaments. Somebody is more precious ornament, another item is less precious. Something may not be visible to the eye, may not appeal to the eye, the other one may be very attractive. They are all gold. Similarly, he's saying the jiva is also Ishvara Tattva only. In what sense? Now we'll understand this. Brahmana jiveshwaratvam upadhikalpitam. Of the Param Brahma, this is jiva and this is Brahman. This kind of division that we make in traditional religious theological parlance or perspectives, these are upadhikalpitam. These are because of upadhi. These are just a game of labeling. You are labeling somebody as chief secretary, somebody as the head of the department, somebody as voter. He's approving the election. At the same time, he's organizing the election. He also goes to vote. So he's a voter also. These are all upadhis. He's as a voter, same person. And there's another example which will come in the Vedanta. There is a lady in a house. Yeah, young lady. She has a little child. The child looks at her as the source of its survival. Mother. Her husband looks at her as his beloved, source of his emotional comfort and love and all that. And there is a man who has married her off in this new family, her dad. She has a brother, she has a sister, and she has friends. Then she has a sister in law, a brother in law. And then maybe somebody looks at her with a pair of, what do you call it? Carnal eyes is an object because she's so beautiful. Same girl. For somebody, she's a bahu. For somebody, she's a daughter. Somebody is a daughter-in-law. She's a doctor outside. And maybe she's a voter. So many terms. The fundamental reality remains the same. And that is a point Vedanta always tries to drive home to all of us. So that even if in the Vyavahara Kala, we have Bheda Buddhi. This is different from that. But ultimately, we are always aware that there is no real enmity, there is no real difference, and there is no real conflict or friendship. These are all playing out at the level of the surface of manifestation, not in reality. Therefore, in this particular verse is very interesting. Nanu desadhikrita parichedo brahmana mastu. Now, this Purva Pakhya, the defense lawyer, the student who is very smart, he's saying, okay, I give it to you because you are a smart logician. And you have made a very long argument to prove that Brahman is Desakala Vastu Paricheda Sunya. You have done it? Okay, fine, I agree. Let it. I agree with you. Then, Jiveshwara Kritaha Akinasya. However, there is a Jiva who is Alpagya, Kinchitgya, he knows a little, he has a little money. And then if you don't eat for 3-4 days, you will starve, you will become weak, you will crumble. You might manage 9 days, Navaratri, or those who are keeping Rosa for 1 month, but they were eating at night. But then you are restricting your food intake or maybe a few activities for certain phase of life. Fine. Does that make you Ishvara? Do you know what's happening anywhere? God is omnipresent, omniscient, yeah, and omnipotent. You are none of these. So why shouldn't that distinction between man and God, Bhakta and Bhagavan, if you ask any Vaishnava, or if you ask, don't talk to Advaita Vedantists and the Kashmiri Saiva, followers, because they are Advaitavadis. And don't even talk to Buddhists; they are also Advaitavadis. You talk to all other people. Those who are dualists, they believe in a transcendental God and themselves. For all them, they have to accept that there is a distinction. Otherwise, they will think, how will he help me if he's same as me? Who is this Ganesh? Why should I worship him? If Brahman is real, how do I worship Durga? The real student of Vedanta knows the secret. He has no problem. Because these are pratikopashana. You are imagining Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva is an aspect of that supreme reality, and you are meditating him for a certain benefit. Like in the Ganges, you can take a bath in Gangotri, or you can take a bath in Ganga Sagar. It remains the same Ganga. The ghats, the places of your birth, location, these are different, and they give you different experiences. Similarly, whether you worship or you are devoted to Allah or Jesus or Brahma or Vishnu or Shiva or any god man, it's your choice. Yeah, that's what he's explaining, that this is not real, but the Vedanti outrightly doesn't refute it. He's saying these are because of the game of applying upadhis on that Suddha Sattva, sorry, on that Suddha Brahman, Satyamiti. So he's now going this. Satyam Jnanamanantam Yad Brahma Tadvastu Tasya Tat Ishwaratvam Tajivatva Mupadhi Dvaya Kalpitam. Satyam Jnanam Anandam Yad Brahma Tadvastu Tasya Tat. In a very beautiful way, he's trying to explain this. Yeah. So if you look at this particular thing, what he's trying to say, that whatever you are trying to make sense, Satyam, Jnanam, Yad Vastu Brahma, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. These are the dharmas. But remember, these are not qualities the way you say he's a kind king. She's a very nice lady. She's a very compassionate woman. These are words you're using. These are qualities attributed to a certain person. Satyatva, Jnanatva, and Anantya. These are not qualities of Brahman. These are discussed inner for us to remove lower way of defining the absolute or restricting the absolute. So it's for Attad Vyavrati, for removing constraints on our concept of the absolute. But the absolute is not the concept. The absolute is beyond all concepts. In order for us to have some understanding of it, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma word is used. Yad Brahma Tasya Tad Vastu Tasya Tat. Now, this Satyam means Badarahitya Satta. Satyam, that means Yatna Vadyate Ta Satyam, which cannot be denied, refuted, challenged. And then Satyam Badara. So Badarahita Satta. And Jnanam is Swaprakasa Chaitanya. What is Swaprakasa? The best way to understand is, in a dark room you are entering and there is a lamp. With the light, with the help of that light, you can see other things. But who is showing you the lamp? With lamp light, you are seeing other things. But lamp light, no, you see it. It declares itself. The sun declares itself. There is no other sun which declares sun's presence. Similarly, this Brahman, there is no other proof which will validate the presence or existence of the Brahman. Iswa Prakasa Chaitanyam. And then Anantam, we just discussed it, Desa Kala Vastu Paricheda Sunyam, free from the limitations, restrictions of time and space and substance. Tad Vastu, Tadeva Paramartha Vastu. Tad Vastu, that alone is real. Vastu here is not object. Tad Vastu, that is real. That is ultimately real. Paramastha Vastu. Tasya Tat. Tasya Eva Swarupa. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma that you are all mentioning. This is the Swarupa of that Brahman. Now you might say, how are you able to define the Swarupa of Brahman? Because actually Brahman is Avang Manashugochar. It's beyond words. It's avachya. Maya is anirvachaniya. But Brahman is avachya. It's beyond words, beyond the reach of your sense organs, beyond the reach of your mind and intellect. So how do you define it? No, it's for our understanding. As I told you, in a very gradual plane, it's a graded process of learning where there is adhyaropa and apavada. These lakshanas, once you meditate on the Brahman, will slowly fall apart and you will be in that absolute consciousness. Therefore, he's saying tasyata tasyeva swarupam. And then, what about jivatva and ishwaratva? Then he's saying ishwaratva and jivatva. What is ishwaratva? Godliness, the qualities, the powers, the knowledge, the prosperity, all that you associate with the idea of God in jivatva, our fallibility, our vulnerability, our limited power, limited wealth, all that you associated with the jiva. Both. That means Ishvara Bhava and Jiva Bhava. What is that? Which godness of God and the animalness or humanness of human. These are upadhidvya kalpitam. These are ways of labeling. Yeah, these are all upadhidvyam. What kind of upadhi? Maya upadhi. Yeah, and then jiva for jiva is avidya upadhi. We'll discuss that at length if we're moving forward. You see that prakriti is trigunatmika, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So there is a predominance of rajas and tamas in all of us. Yeah, and therefore in Brahman, in the Ishvara, the Suddha Sattvatmika, Suddha Sattva abounds. Now you might immediately turn around and ask, if that is so, in Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, the Puranas say another thing, that Brahman is Rajas, Shiva is Tamas, and Vishnu is Sattvika. Then how can you say that Ishvara is Suddha Sattva? This like this, that in Purana, when we are talking about Ishvara, we are not talking about these avatars, we are not talking about these people, talking about the supreme God, which becomes the creator with Maya Upadhi. And then, because it's all magical, if you look at Shiva Purana, Lord Shiva is the absolute, ultimate, absolute reality. In Vishnu Purana, Vishnu is the absolute reality. You look at Devi Bhagavatam, Navratri is going on. What did she tell? Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara. They were like little kids moving around in an ocean, not finding where to stand. And suddenly they see in Manidvipa, beautiful, the Supreme Mother is sitting there. And Vishnu says, I remember her. Who is she? She's the one who had taken care of me when I was lying on a leaf of the banyan tree, Bhattapatra. He remembers the Supreme Mother. And then Devi tells him, Sarvam khalu evaham, nanyad asti sanatana. He says, Vishnu, keep this in your mind. I'll give you the power to rule over this whole world, but remember the secret. Sarvam khalu eva aham. I am verily all this. Na anyad asti sanatana. There is nothing eternal other than me. What is she meaning? She's no different from Brahman. This Parameshwari that we are doing this Navaratri, she's ultimately Param Brahma. Yeah. So if you look at this mantra, uh, this overcoming, just a mild digression. So Om Aing Ring Kling Chamundai Viche. I was looking at the Bhaskara Raya commentary on it, very powerful commentary, where it explains Aing Ring Klim. Aing is that Saraswati Vija, Bhagava Vija, and Ring, the Bhuvaneshwari Vija, Maya Vija, and then Kling, Kama Vija. So anything you want to happen, you have that power of yeah, awareness and power to see through the delusion, the Maya Vija. And then you have the Kama Vija, everything that manifesting power. And then what he's saying, Chamunda, why is she called Chamunda? Because you have this Chanda and a Munda, the demons that she destroyed them. Yeah? Who is this Chanda Munda? He explains Chanda is Chanda and a Munda. Chanda is essentially the power of anger in you, the negative energy. Munda is your ahankara. Or immediately he twists it and says it's bahirmukhata and antarmukhata. Sometimes you are engaged with this external world, and sometimes you are all within yourself. You're burning. You're not happy. So there is either you are in the entrapped by Munda or Chanda. Either you are trapped within in your thoughts, your cravings, or you are trapped in the external world. That's why Sri Chamundasi enables you to overcome these two demons which are verily within all of us. Biche, Chedana. She gives you that liberation. She liberates you. And therefore, this whole, if you look at all this, that Swarupa is a Brahman. But when we are doing Upasana, when his Dheya, Jnana Vicharya. We will do Vichara, Vedanta. But Dheya is a very interesting thing that you can hold both Jnana and Upasana. Upasana means you have to have something outside. Then you imagine this as if it's outside, but actually we are all part of it. These are called Upadhis. She becomes, Parashakti. She becomes Sadashiva. She becomes Mahavishnu. All, and she becomes Ganeshji. She takes that supreme self, takes all these names and forms. He can take the name of Allah or Mahavir Jaina, Buddha. He can take the form of Jesus. We got no problem from the standpoint of the secret of Advaita Vedanta. Therefore, then he's saying these are upadhis. And therefore, Yad Brahma Satyam Jnanam Anantam Tadeva Paramartha Vastu. That is ultimately true. And Tasya Brahmana Ishwaratvam Jivatvam. So that Brahman itself becomes Ishwara and Jiva. With avidya upadhi, veil of ignorance, we are trapped in the samsara, and then we forget our Swarupa. Yeah? So that is the Paramartha Vastu. So Bastava, if you look at Bastavata, what is the fundamental reality? Ekameva Advitiyam Brahma. So Tasya Swarupena Kinchit Bheda. In the Swarupa of the Brahman, there is no Bheda. There is no Kartritva, no Bhaktritva, no Sarvajnatva, nothing. Why? Sarvepi Vyavahara Dharmaha Upadhi Nimittaha. Whatever we are using in our Vyavahara, they are because of these Upadhis or labelings. Yeah? And what is that particular thing that he is saying? With Upadhi, X appears as X delta or X appears as Y. That is the power of Upadhi. Yeah? As if it's a Bhinna Rupa. That is how it's appearing. What is the good example they give in Vedanta? He's saying, look, space is infinite space. Not only covering this solar system, but millions of solar systems, multiverses, several galaxies, and all that. But the space within, let's imagine, the space within a cell phone, space within a pod, that is also space, but we call it pod space. And then we fill it with water, we cannot even see that space. We see the water filled jar, and then the akasha gets reflected in it, and we see that jalakasha, and we say that is the akasha. That is what is Chidavasa. The subjectivity that we have is the jalakasha, the pratyak chaitanya, the intimate pure self, that pratyagatma, which is there intimately in all of us, is no different from the paramatma. This pratyagatma, jivatma, and paramatma is one reality differentiated by contours of the jar, like akasha and ghatakasha, differentiated by a certain upadhi, one naming technique. What is that? Ghata. That is the adjective. Ghata akasha. Delimited by this ghata. We break the ghata, what happens to that ghata akasha? It remains mahakasha. We say the ghata akasha got destroyed, it became mahakasha. Actually, it's only akasha, it's only that unlimited space. What are the Shruti Vakyas? So then this particular upadhi of the Maya upadhi, that Parambrahma becomes Ishvara Sarvasaktiman. Yeah, Jagat Karanabhuta. He creates whole this sansara. And then when it becomes Abhidya upadhi, overload of Rajasika and Tamasika energy, dominated by Chanda and Munda, what's the situation? Karta, Bhokta, Sukha, Dukha, Anubhava Karta. These are the imaginations we have. I suffered a lot. Do you know how much sacrifice I've done? And these children don't understand. Look at this wife. She doesn't care for me. All these are grievances of all married people. Why? Because of jivatva. What is that jivatva? Basically a delusional self-presumption. Fundamentally, everybody is one, no different from the Brahman. Then, where did you get all this? Are there any Shruti Vakyas? Can you show it to me? Yeah, I can. Chandogya Upanishad, if you look at it, it says Tattvamasi, you are that. You are means as a human being, you are God. No. The consciousness which is enveloped in your body mind complex, the consciousness which pervades the soul universe is one and the same. So there is a Vachyartha and Lakshyartha. We'll discuss all that as we're going. So Eko Devaha Sarva Bhuteshu Guraha. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3:11 it mentions. Brahmasmi Brihadarnik mentions. And Chandogya Upanishad 6:8:7. And the verse number, it discusses about that Tattvamasi. Shvetaketu is advised by his father. Beautiful guy. So if you look at this commentary on the screen that you are seeing, Satyam Jnanam Anantam iti Lakshanena Pratipaditam Yad Brahma. With this particular definition or way of explaining the Brahman, Lakshanena Yat Pratipaditam, what is explained, Tad Bastu Tadeva Paramartham. That is the ultimate truth in reality. Tasya Tad Ishwaratvam Jivatvam iti Padayojana. And that Param Brahma is now appearing as God and as human beings. And how? With upati. Jiveshwaratvayor api nistatva, even though actually they are not really real, they are not fundamentally real. Upadhi kalpitatvad tad ashrayor jiveshwaro api nistatvam eva iti na tatkrita paricheda sambhavaiti bhavaha. What was the defense lawyer's question? Desha kala vastu paricheda sunyatam is applying to Brahman. I got no problem. But Jiva Ishvara Bheda is there. So what is Brahman? He cannot be a Jiva. Ishvara cannot be a Jiva. So there is some kind of a distinction. He wanted to establish his Bheda Buddhi. And that is being refuted, is saying that yes, yes, this is how you use in our everyday language, that there is God and I'm looking for his grace and love and all that. But that is Vyavaharika. That is for purifying my consciousness. I might do all that. But absolutely, these very words, these very distinctions are not ultimately real. At a very transitional intermediate state of our spiritual evolution, these are meaningful, not real. Worshipping any particular god, any form, or if you have a Abrahamic religions or you have Aryan religions, whatever you have, they are meaningful, very helpful. However, ultimately they are refutable. Why? Because there is neha nanasti kinchan. There is only one truth, and that is ultimately real. The rest of it, yeah, fine. These are transitional hypotheses. As we grow spiritually, these will fall apart. What will remain is that absolute. Then we'll go to the next verse. Tatra Ishvara Upadi Bhutam Saktim Pratipadayati Saktiriti. Now, first he has to explain the Jivatva, that with Avidya Upadhi, and he has to also explain the Ishwaratva. Now he's explaining that Ishvara Upadhi, how that materializes. Sakti Rasteshwari Kachite Sarvavastu Niyamika Anandamayam Gudha Sarveshu Vastushu. Yeah. So there is God? Yes. And how is it possible? Because you are saying only Suddha Brahma. He's saying no, with Maya Upadhi is possible. I will explain to you. There is no conflict. I will have Seshwaravada and I will also have Nirvisheshavada. Savishesha Ishvara, Nirvishesha Brahman can coexist. Why? Two contradictory things cannot exist at the same time if they are samasattaka. If their existential reality is at the same level, they cannot coexist. There is an office, there is a position, as CEO. Can there be two people sitting on the same chair? No, not possible. But you can say chief financial officer or chief operating officer, chief executive officer, chief financial operator. You can CFO, COO, CEO, all three can exist. There's no problem. But the layers of the powers are different. And above the CEO, there is a chairperson. Yeah. Now, Brahman is not chairperson or any of these. Chairperson here is Ishvara. And you have the CEOs and CEOs and all kinds of gods, goddesses, different pantheons, different faiths, different communities. No problem. Ishvara is the chairperson. Yeah. And above this is that absolute reality out of which he himself has manifested with Maya Upadhi. And that is what he's explaining. Sakti asti aishwari. Now he's trying to explain. Somebody might doubt, how do you prove God's existence? And you'll find a combination of different arguments here about God's existence. Aishwari Shakti exists there. Now, the transcendental theories of God will have different other theories. Here it's a very typical, interesting formulation about God, because we are actually not justifying the existence of God. We are trying to help our minds conceive of this multi-layered, complex reality where the concept of God is very there and we deal with it, it helps us. Then you go to another level, it doesn't mean anything to you because you are now looking for meaning beyond it. It's like you study Newton in physics, you are not refusing it, then you study quantum physics. You're not refusing what Newton has said. They coexist. Classical physics is operating at a plane, And then the modern physics become relevant at another plane. Yet the modern physics cannot explain what is happening in everyday life. You need classical physics. Therefore, this is a very interesting thing. He's saying Aishwari Shakti Kachit is that Shakti is there. It's Aishwari Shakti. Why? This is difficult to understand. It's magical power. Kachit. Sarva Vastu Niyamika. And with that power, everything is being ordered, regulated here. Now, this is different from the way a transcendental God is controlling everything. He's distant from us, he's controlling. Then you do something and you go and he's going to punish you, and all these theories are there. We're not talking about a transcendental God here. We are saying that there is that immanent secret of the existence which accounts for orderliness here. Anandamayam Arabhya. We did the PanchaKosha Viveka. That is what the chapter is all about. So you have the Annamaya Kosha, then you have the Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, then Vijnanamaya Kosha, and then you have the Anandamaya Kosha during the Susupti state. Anandamayam Arabhya Gudha Sarveshu Vastusu. If you have all these Panchakoshas, do you see the Brahman? Why the word Kosha? Kosha because it hides. It's like a packet. These are Namarupas. So the Annamaya Kosha is the physical seeds. Yeah. And then the Manomaya Kosha is this Jnana Indriyas plus Mana. Pranamaya Kosha is the Pancha Prana. Yeah. And the Karma Indriyas, they together form the Pranamaya Kosha. You go above is the Manomaya Kosha, Manas plus Pancha Jnana Indriyas. Born out of the Apanchakrita Pancha Mahabhuta. Remember this. You have to keep that in the mind. For the Karmendriyas also are born out of the Panchakrita means physical seeds. This Bhautika body, the physical body. And then you go up Vijnanamaya Kosha, Buddhi plus Pancha Jnanendriyas. And above, you have the Anandamaya Kosha, where in the Manomaya, if you look at the dream state, for example, the mind and the manas is active, but a lot of things are not active. Your Jnana, the Karmendriyas are not active, your body is not active, but you are creating a reality. But in Sushupti case, you are experiencing Ananda, you relax, you experience that relaxation, but not with the help of your mind. But when you wake up, you say, Aham Sukham Aswapsam Na Kinchid Avedisham. And because you are being able to remember that you had a wonderful sleep, the Vedanti says there must be somebody who experienced that happy state of sleep, and that is Shakti Chaitanya. Yeah? That is in the Annamaya Kosha, in the Karana Sharira. So you have the Karana Sharira, the Sukshma Sharira is Vijnanamaya Kosha, Manamaya Kosha, and Pranamaya Kosha. And then you have the Sthula Sharira, the Annamaya Kosha. But in none of these, the Brahman, that Satta, that Sadvastu, that fine Atma is visible. So Gudha Sarveshu Vastusu is hidden in all the things. That is what is the point being driven. Spashtapada Yodana Sarva Vastu Niyamanena Sa Anumiya Iti Bhavaha. How do you know there is something called Maya Shakti? He's saying, okay, you have a nephew who is very mischievous. Yeah. So you have a marriage party and everybody has come to your house. And then you go to your room, your table, and you know that guy who is very inquisitive, very curious. So he will, look for some books. He's thinking that you have some storybooks and comics. So he has made a mess of your study table when you are returning. How do you know? You immediately ask your wife or sister, whoever is at home, is that nephew of mine at home? Yeah, he had come. Maybe some neighbor's son or daughter. She had come? Yeah. You absolutely know. How did you know? You did anumana. From you did inference. There is a guy who always disturbs the books because he's very curious, looks for books. My table is very disturbed. Most likely he had come. Yeah, from the effect, you would deduce the cause. That's anumana. There's a certain syllogism in Indian logic. And therefore, he's saying it's anomia because without that energy, without that Maya Shakti, how do you make sense of it? And there will be a lot of, in the next verse, the most interesting point I would say before we conclude is that if you don't imagine that, who explains that the sun will every day rise in the east? Why not on the west or maybe in the north one day? For a change. He gets bored. Yeah. Therefore, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a statement that everybody is so scared of that ultimate reality, that as per his dictates, everybody is doing his job. He does nothing. He's just very quiet. Like a very intelligent boss, he enters the office. He doesn't give any orders. The moment he enters the office, everybody starts doing the stuff in the best possible manner. Why? Because of him. But he doesn't do anything. That is what the Brahman. Yeah, that is what that Ishvara thing, that Maya Shakti, as a result of which everything is in a certain order. Things are happening. But you might ask, what about war? What about all kinds of criminal acts? What of all these things are happening? These are challenging thoughts. And we will be looking at them tomorrow because we have the next session. So from 38, we'll graduate to 39, but in between, we'll have a special discussion on what is the implication of this and what is that Sarva Niyamakata, that it controls and regulates everything. Before we go to the next verse, with this, I'll just stop here, and then we'll move forward. We can. You have any questions? We can do the Santi Mantra.